Thankfully. And now we turn to politics, and in studio, our old friend Dick Morris. Dick, if you had to write a headline for the CPAC conference that just was held outside Washington, what would that headline be?
Well, it would be a combination of politics and theology. It would be, there is life after death.
Well, I think also Churchill had something like that to say about politics being reminiscent of war. And go ahead, sir.
We'll talk about the CPAC straw poll, the results, in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about some of the sound bites that emerged from CPAC over this weekend, the bold-faced names and the bold-faced sound bites that we had. Let's start with Sarah Palin, then we'll get into Rick Perry, and then Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. First, here's Sarah Palin.
I do not like these dirty crooks or how they lie and cook the books. I do not like when Congress stills. I do not like their crony dills. I do not like this spying, man. I do not like, oh yes we can.
Well, she certainly has a way with words there. The former Alaska governor revving up the crowd at CPAC over the weekend. Palin, of course, doing a riff on Senator Ted Cruz's filibuster speech on the Senate floor. Now, in that same nursery rhyme, there was also talk about not liking Uncle Sam or his health care scam.
It is time for Washington to focus on the few things the Constitution establishes as the federal government's role. Defend our country. Provide a cogent foreign policy, and what the heck, deliver the mail, preferably on time and on Saturdays. Get out of the healthcare business. Get out of the education business. Stop hammering industry. Let the sleeping giant of American enterprise create prosperity again.
Well, Perry doing something there the GOP has had a hard time doing, laying out a future for the GOP and also defining the role of government. Perry might be leaving the Texas governor's mansion, but that speech right there proves his voice still carries in conservative circles.
It also proves he doesn't know the difference between how to speak on TV and how to speak on a lectern. In person, that's effective. On TV, it looks like he's waving arms and crazy.
Important point. Let's move on to Rand Paul's speech as well. Rand Paul apparently appealing to the youth-heavy crowd. He also talked about how he is actually doing things, mentioning his filibuster on drones, and that got a standing ovation from the crowd. He also mentioned his pending lawsuit against the Obama administration that focuses on the targeted killing of American citizens who are believed to be terror suspects without due process.
It is decidedly not a time for the faint of heart. It's a time for boldness and action. The time is now. Stand with me. Let us stand together for liberty. Thank you, and God bless America.
All right there. So, that's the takeaway real quick in 3 sound bites, if you can boil it down to that from CPAC. Perry's speech, Dick, you mentioned it's good in person, but doesn't really translate well onto TV. Do you agree with that, JD?
Well, there are times when great oratory can be delivered to a huge group, but also with the presence of the television cameras, it's important to, even in a huge crowd, establish the notion of intimacy and contact with the camera, just like here. We're having a discussion here, but we're also having a discussion with you, and you can't lose that element even in a major speech with the presence of television.
It got a standing ovation, Dick, but it's important, if we take a look at the bigger picture, whether or not it had an impact on anything, because we can look at the polling results, which we'll do in a second, but, Rand Paul was the winner of the poll, and we'll have the specific results, but I want to talk about the youth that is present at CPAC. One of the things that was surprising about Rick Perry's speech is the way he was able to get the crowd onto their feet. Considering that the crowd leaned so heavy, you'd expect it from a guy like Rand Paul, not necessarily from a guy like Rick Perry, but he also presented a vision kind of at the party for the future and define the role of government. And within these young conservatives who dominate CPAC, that's what they want to hear.
Yeah, well, all the focus has been on Latino voters. But I believe the real swing voters in this election are young people.
Let's take a look at that graphic we have made up, if we can, real quick. It was something like more than 30% of the people who attended and voted in the CPAC straw poll were younger than 30 years of age. So it dominates. The crowd is dominated by college kids.
I think there's been a real shift among young people away from the Democrats. Remember, in 2012, Romney defeated Obama. Doesn't that sound good? By 1 point among people over 30. But he lost the election because he lost 2-1 for people under 30. Now the job approval of Obama for people under 30 is the same as it is for people over 30 at 40%. So I think there's a real move away from him because they realize Obamacare is targeted at them. They're its victims.
Yeah, Obamacare is certainly an issue with young voters as well. We're looking at the final results here. You see Rand Paul just dominating the straw poll results, which again, the actual respondents to this were young kids for the most part. Only a small portion of voters were older than 65. J.D., so and as you're looking at this as a potential candidate in these Senate races that we're seeing in 2014 and looking ahead to 2016, you know, we've heard about the GOP trying to target the youth vote before. Is that a fool's errand?
No, no, it never is. The idea is you reach out to everyone and you have messages that are important. For example, I know someone who is waiting via Skype to visit with us may be chomping at the bit to talk about the message he delivered. And we're going to get to Governor Huckabee in just a little while, but the youth vote is very, very important. But you can't forget this, and I know this from running for Congress and running for the U.S. Senate. As much as we talk about the youth vote, the fact is that people 50 years of age and over vote. And they pay attention, and they read what comes into to them in the mailbox, and they check things on the internet. They are involved voters. It's great to have the young people, but man, you better not forget the bread and butter, and that's the voters 50 plus.
It's true. Over 60% of the voters younger than 40 as well in this poll. So it's just maybe a flavor of what's in the Republican Party right now. But Dick, I want to talk about something you focused on real quickly. We have about 90 seconds left before we go to break. But you've talked recently about how Obama's trying to show that he's getting things done with these executive orders. We heard Rand Paul mention how he did the filibuster on drones, how he sued the president. Is that a direct ploy or plea to young folks showing that, hey, we're actually getting things done? Because I think with these young voters, there's this malaise about Congress or Washington unable to get anything done.
We see it as conservatives as usurpation of authority by the president. But the voters see it mainly as getting a lot of things done. And it's not only that the executive orders are accomplishing something, which they're really not, they just show.
Right.
But they call attention to the advocacy of the position. So go through it. New labeling for foods, lower cost for college, more accessibility to student loans, trade relations and retraining of workers. Every day.
Yeah, there's a lot of
new
problems, and
minimum
the
wage.
American public want to
Every
see things
day
are getting
there's
done.
something new that Obama comes out.
All right, we'll continue.
This is the strategy we use to keep Clinton viable.
All right, we'll continue this conversation in just a moment. We have much more, and hopefully with Governor Mike Huckabee as well.
That's right. You'll want to hear from Governor Huckabee. He will join us when we come back on America's Forum.